Kaylee, thank you. Now to the sentencing for Kouri Richins, the Utah mother convicted of killing her husband, Eric, and then writing a children's book about grief. Later on this morning, we're expected to learn how long she'll spend behind bars.
In 2019, on a family vacation in Greece, Eric Richins got violently sick after drinking something his wife had prepared for him. He recovered. He didn't think much of it publicly, but according to his own sister, Eric quietly confided in her afterward that he believed his wife, Kouri, had tried to poison him. 3 years later, in March of 2022, Eric Richins was dead in his own bedroom, in his own home outside Park City, Utah, after drinking a cocktail his wife had made to celebrate one of her real estate deals. It would take a medical examiner, a forensic accountant, a housekeeper testifying under immunity, and nearly 4 years of investigation and trial before a jury finally answered the question Eric himself seemed to have suspected the answer to years before he died. Before we continue, if you're one of the more than 90% of people watching this channel who aren't subscribed yet, go ahead and hit that button now, along with leaving this video a like. And if you'd like us to cover true crime cases from your own city, drop the name of it in the comments. We read every one, and it genuinely helps shape what we look into next. Now let's go back to where this story really starts, long before anyone thought to call it murder. Kouri and Eric Richins were married on June 15, 2013. By outward appearances, they were a successful young Utah couple. Eric co-owned a stonemasonry business and was, by every account from people who knew him, a devoted father to their 3 young sons, deeply involved in their lives and their activities. Kouri worked in real estate, building a business flipping houses, buying properties, renovating them, and selling them for a profit. At any given time, according to her own mother, Kouri might be juggling 2 or 3 different renovation projects at once. To friends and extended family, it looked like a full, driven, successful life. The couple had signed a prenuptial agreement early in their marriage, one that specified Eric's individual assets would remain his alone if they ever divorced, but that Kouri stood to inherit a portion of his estate if he died while they were still married. Between 2015 and 2017, according to court records, Kouri quietly took out multiple life insurance policies on Eric's life, without his knowledge, totaling nearly $2 million. By 2019, cracks were beginning to show, cracks that at the time looked like nothing more than an unsettling coincidence. During that family trip to Greece, Eric became violently ill after drinking something Kouri had made for him. He recovered, but according to his sister, he told her afterward that he suspected his own wife had tried to poison him. At the time, there was no investigation, no formal accusation, nothing beyond one husband's private, unspoken suspicion about his own marriage. By October of 2020, that suspicion had apparently calcified into something more concrete. According to court filings, Eric approached an estate planning attorney and explained that he had 2 goals. The first was to protect himself, in the short term, from what he described as ongoing abuse and misuse of his finances by Kouri. The second was to protect his 3 sons in the long term, by making absolutely certain that Kouri would never be the one managing his property after he was gone. Eric set up a trust designed to keep his assets out of Kouri's control if he died. He did not tell her about it. A month later, he quietly removed her as the beneficiary on a $500,000 life insurance policy. Kouri, according to prosecutors, would not learn any of this until after Eric was already dead. Meanwhile, the couple's finances were unraveling in a much more visible way. By March of 2022, a forensic accountant would later testify, Kouri Richins was roughly $7.5 million in debt, and according to prosecutors, she was doing something else entirely apart from real estate. She was having an affair with a man named Robert Josh Grossman. Text messages later shown to the jury captured Kouri describing her dream of leaving Eric, walking away with millions of dollars from a divorce settlement, and eventually marrying Grossman instead. In early 2022, prosecutors say Kouri reached out to the family's occasional housekeeper, a woman named Carmen Lauber, and asked her for help getting prescription pain medication, which Kouri claimed was for a business investor dealing with a back injury. According to Lauber, who would later testify under a grant of immunity, this wasn't an isolated request. She told the court she provided illicit pills to Kouri on 4 separate occasions between December of 2021 and March of 2022. On the third of those occasions, in early February 2022, prosecutors say Kouri specifically asked for something stronger, referring to it, according to testimony, as the Michael Jackson stuff. The prosecutor would later tell the jury that Kouri Richins didn't know much about the world of illicit street drugs, but she knew exactly what drug had killed Michael Jackson, and she knew it was lethal. Then came Valentine's Day, February 14, 2022. That day, Kouri left Eric a sandwich along with a love note, according to court filings. Shortly after eating it, Eric broke out in hives and had trouble breathing. He used his own son's EpiPen and took Benadryl, and eventually the reaction subsided. But according to court records, Eric called 2 separate friends that same day and told them he genuinely believed he was going to die. He later told one friend directly that he thought his wife had tried to poison him. 12 days after that, on February 26, 2022, prosecutors say Kouri picked up another batch of fentanyl pills from a drop-off location arranged through Carmen Lauber. Eric Richins would be dead within 6 days. In the days leading up to his death, Eric and Kouri had reportedly been arguing over something else entirely, a 22,000-square-foot mansion Kouri wanted to buy as her next big real estate project. According to court documents, Eric intended to tell her not to go through with the purchase. On the night of March 3 into March 4, 2022, Eric and Kouri sat down together to celebrate. Kouri had just closed a real estate deal, and the two of them had drinks to mark the occasion, a lemon drop shot and then a Moscow Mule. According to the account Kouri would later give investigators, she fell asleep in one of her son's bedrooms that night. When she woke up and went into her own bedroom, she found Eric cold to the touch. He was 39 years old. Eric Richins was found dead at the foot of his bed on the morning of March 4, 2022. In the immediate aftermath, his family understood his death to be the result of something like a brain aneurysm, a sudden, tragic, but ultimately natural medical event. There was grief. There was a funeral. There was, for a period of time, no reason for anyone outside the immediate family to suspect anything other than an unthinkable tragedy. But almost immediately, some of the people closest to Eric had a different, quieter reaction. His sister, Katie Richins Benson, would later testify that when she arrived at the house that night, she found Kouri looking, in her words, well put together, her hair fully done, an image that struck her as strange given the circumstances. That unease sat alongside a history the family already knew about, including that earlier incident in Greece, and it was enough to make Eric's relatives begin asking questions almost immediately, questions that would eventually reach investigators. An autopsy and toxicology report gave those questions a concrete, horrifying answer. Eric Richins had died of fentanyl intoxication. The level of the drug in his blood was measured at roughly 5 times a lethal dose. According to some reporting on the case, the concentration found in his stomach was so extreme that it would have theoretically been enough to kill thousands of additional people. This was not an accidental ingestion. This was, medical examiners concluded, a massive, deliberate overdose. As investigators dug deeper into the Richins' finances, they uncovered a paper trail that painted an increasingly damning picture. 2 months before Eric's death, according to prosecutors, Kouri had logged into a New York life insurance account tied to a $2 million buy or sell agreement between Eric and his business partner, and attempted to change the beneficiary designation to herself. The insurance company flagged the unusual change and alerted both Eric and his business partner. Kouri was removed as a beneficiary before Eric ever died. About a month before his death, prosecutors say Kouri also took out an additional $100,000 life insurance policy on Eric, this time forging his signature on the paperwork and nomming herself the beneficiary. Eric's sister also testified about a forged signature on a $250,000 home equity line of credit, along with credit cards that had reportedly been opened in Eric's name without his knowledge. Then, in a detail that would later strike almost everyone following the case as darkly ironic, court records showed that Kouri closed the deal on that 22,000-square-foot mansion just one day after Eric's death. On March 5, 2022, the very purchase he had reportedly planned to talk her out of. In the year that followed, Kouri Richins publicly presented herself not as a suspect, but as a grieving widow raising 3 young boys on her own. In March of 2023, she self-published a children's picture book titled, "Are You With Me?", designed to help kids cope with the loss of a parent. She sold it on Amazon and appeared on a local Utah television program to promote it, describing the grief she and her sons had gone through together. To the public watching those interviews, it looked like an act of healing born out of unimaginable loss. 2 months later, on May 8, 2023, Kouri Richins was arrested. She was initially charged with aggravated murder and 3 counts of possession of a controlled substance with intent to distribute. Those charges would later be expanded to include attempted aggravated murder, insurance fraud, mortgage fraud, and multiple counts of forgery. She pleaded not guilty to every charge, and her defense attorneys argued publicly that there was no substantial evidence to support the case against her. The case moved slowly through Utah's court system for nearly 3 years. In August of 2023, a judge ruled that the $2 million buy or sell insurance payout Kouri had once tried to redirect to herself would instead go to the trust Eric had quietly set up before his death, the very trust designed specifically to keep his assets out of her control. Kouri Richins' trial finally began on February 23, 2026, in the Summit County Courthouse in Park City, and stretched on for roughly 3 weeks, including 13 separate days of testimony. Her defense team called no witnesses in her defense, and Kouri herself chose not to testify. The prosecution built its case around 2 central pillars, motive and method. To establish motive, they called a forensic accountant who laid out, in detail, the scale of Kouri's financial distress, the roughly $7.5 million in debt she was carrying by the time of Eric's death, alongside the affair she'd been having, and the messages in which she described wanting Eric's money without wanting to stay married to him. Prosecutors also showed the jury Kouri's own internet search history, recovered from her devices, including searches for terms like Women Utah Prison, Luxury Prisons for the Rich America, and perhaps most chillingly, lethal dose of fentanyl. To establish method, prosecutors called Carmen Lauber, the family's housekeeper, who testified under a grant of immunity that she had sold Kouri illicit pills, including fentanyl, on multiple occasions in the months before Eric's death. The defense pushed back hard on Lauber's credibility, showing the jury video of investigators warning her that she could lose her drug court deal and face serious prison time of her own if she didn't cooperate, and arguing that she had every incentive to tell prosecutors whatever they wanted to hear. The defense also pointed to an empty prescription pill bottle found on Eric's own nightstand the night he died, along with bags of edible gummies he was known to use regularly, suggesting an alternative explanation that had nothing to do with Kouri at all. In his closing argument, Summit County's chief prosecutor, Brad Bloodworth, laid out the state's theory of the case in stark terms. Kouri Richins, he argued, wanted to leave her marriage, but she did not want to leave the money that came with it. He walked the jury through what he described as an escalating series of attempts. First, the fentanyl-laced sandwich on Valentine's Day, an attempt Eric survived only because he recognized something was wrong quickly enough to use his son's EpiPen. Then, weeks later, the drinks on the night of March 3rd and 4th, the lemon drop shot and the Moscow Mule, a second attempt, Bloodworth argued, meant to finish what the sandwich had failed to do. The defense countered that this theory of exactly how and when the fentanyl entered Eric's system had never actually been supported by direct forensic evidence, calling it argument dressed up as proof. On March 16, 2026 at 6:30 in the evening, after deliberating for just under 3 hours, the jury returned its verdict. Kouri Richins was found guilty on every count: aggravated murder, attempted aggravated murder, insurance fraud, and forgery. In the courtroom, family members on both sides of the case were seen embracing each other and crying as the verdict was read. Kouri herself stared down at the floor, taking visibly deep breaths as the judge spoke. Her sentencing hearing was held on May 13, 2026, in Park City, a date that happened to fall on what would have been Eric Richins' 44th birthday. Prosecutors formally requested a sentence of life without the possibility of parole, arguing above all that Kouri and Eric's 3 sons deserved to live the rest of their lives without ever having to worry that their mother might one day walk free. In a memo submitted ahead of the hearing, one of the boys, now 13 years old, wrote that he was afraid that if his mother were ever released, she would come after him, his brothers, and the rest of his family. According to victim impact statements read into the record by court-appointed counselors on the children's behalf, one son accused Kouri of caring only about herself and, in his words, her stupid boyfriends. Another child made further disturbing allegations, claiming Kouri had killed several of his pets and that he suspected she may have tried to give him fentanyl as well at some point, causing him to have a seizure. Eric's sister, Katie Richins Benson, also addressed the court, asking the judge to hand down the harshest sentence available. She told the court that after Eric's death, Kouri had prevented the couple's 3 sons from having any contact with Eric's side of the family for 15 months, and she said her brother had come to believe, in the time before his death, that his wife was, in his own words, evil. According to reporting from inside the courtroom, Kouri appeared to smirk and roll her eyes while Katie delivered that statement. The defense, for its part, argued that the woman being described by prosecutors was not the same person who had actually lived through the last several years, urging the judge to consider the totality of who Kouri Richins was, not simply the caricature the prosecution had built during trial. District Court Judge Richard M. Razik was not persuaded to show leniency, announcing the sentences for her insurance fraud, forgery, and attempted murder convictions before turning to the murder charge itself. He ordered that all of her sentences run consecutively, 1 to 15 years on each of 2 insurance fraud counts, up to 5 years for forgery, and 5 years to life for the attempted murder of her husband. Then, addressing the aggravated murder charge directly, he told her that someone convicted of her crimes was, in his words, simply too dangerous to ever be free. He explained that the jury had found, unanimously and beyond a reasonable doubt, that Kouri Richins first attempted to murder her husband and the father of her 3 children, and that after failing in that first attempt, she spent the next 17 days not backing away but doubling down, preparing to try again and ultimately succeeding through poison. And the judge asked the courtroom directly for what? His own answer was a single word: money. He sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Given the opportunity to speak, Kouri Richins addressed the court for roughly 30 minutes, directing most of her remarks to her 3 sons. She told them she knew they likely hated her right now, and that she understood, and that she would be there for them whenever they were ready. She said she couldn't believe what was happening to her, that she had been convicted of taking away one of the people who fulfilled her life the most, and that she remained in shock and disbelief at being found guilty of what she called such a heinous crime. She insisted, directly and repeatedly, that she was not a murderer, telling her sons that the idea that she had taken their father from them was, in her words, an absolute lie, and that she would not accept blame for something she maintained she did not do. She told them she loved them, asked them not to give up on her, and said she believed the justice system would ultimately get her case right, even though, she said, this particular courtroom had not. She vowed to keep fighting to come home to them. Kouri Richins' attorneys have said they intend to appeal both her convictions and her sentence. Prosecutors, for their part, have also asked that she be ordered to pay more than $1.3 million in restitution to the two insurance companies whose policies were connected to the case. And in a separate matter still winding its way through Utah's courts, Kouri faces an entirely additional set of financial crime charges tied to her real estate dealings, a case that, as of now, has not yet gone to trial. What remains, underneath all of the legal proceedings still ahead, is a much simpler and much sadder picture. 3 boys who lost their father in their own home, who were told at first that it had simply been a tragic accident of health, and who are now old enough to have read, in their mother's own trial, exactly what state prosecutors say she poured into his glass, and why. A husband who apparently suspected, as far back as a vacation in Greece 3 years before his death, exactly what his own wife might be capable of, and who tried, quietly and without accusation, to protect his children from it anyway. And a case that took nearly 4 years to move from a quiet home outside Park City, Utah, to a jury's unanimous verdict, delivered in under 3 hours. If this case stayed with you the way it stayed with us, do us a favor and hit subscribe, leave a like, and share this video with someone who appreciates true crime told carefully and honestly. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.